For 74 years, Beatrice played by the rules. She sacrificed everything to care for her dying brother, only to be left a single mocking $1 bill in his will, while his greedy relatives inherited millions. She wept in utter humiliation. But that single dollar, it wasn't an insult. It was the key to an empire. The mahogany-paneled boardroom of Gallagher, Hayes and Associates, located on the 42nd floor of a towering Boston skyscraper, felt less like a place of business and more like an execution chamber. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long, weeping shadows across the polished table. At 74 years old, Beatrice Harrington felt entirely out of place. She sat near the back corner, her frail hands tightly clutching the worn leather handle of a handbag she had bought at a thrift store a decade ago. Her tweed coat was damp from the walk from the T-station. She couldn't afford a taxi, let alone the sleek black town cars that had dropped off the other attendees. Across the table sat her late brother's second wife, Sylvia. Sylvia was 30 years younger than Beatrice's brother Reginald and looked as though she had just stepped off a runway in Milan. She wore a sharp, jet-black designer suit, her platinum blonde hair perfectly coiffed, and she was busily tapping away on her smartphone, looking profoundly bored by the proceedings. Next to Sylvia slouched Preston, Reginald's 30-something nephew from his first marriage, a man who had never worked a day in his life, banking entirely on the family fortune to fund his lavish lifestyle of sports cars and ski trips in Aspen. Beatrice swallowed hard, trying to ignore the disdainful glances Preston kept shooting her way. Reginald Montgomery had been a titan of the New England shipping and logistics industry. He was a hard, uncompromising man who built an empire from nothing. But in his final 3 years, that empire couldn't save him from the ravages of early-onset Alzheimer's and aggressive bone cancer. When the diagnosis came, the sprawling Montgomery family suddenly found themselves incredibly busy. Sylvia took extended grief retreats to luxury spas in Sedona. Preston claimed he couldn't bear to see his uncle in such a weak state and stopped visiting entirely. It was Beatrice who had stepped in. Despite having lived a modest life as a retired public school teacher, Beatrice moved into a cramped guest room in Reginald's massive estate. When Sylvia's high-priced lawyers temporarily froze Reginald's liquid assets during a bitter preliminary divorce filing, a divorce that was halted only by Reginald's rapid decline, Beatrice used her own meager pension to pay for his out-of-pocket medications, his specialized dietary needs, and the co-pays for his visiting nurses. She bathed him when he forgot how to use the shower. She held his trembling hand through agonizing nights. She loved her older brother, remembering the boy who used to protect her from neighborhood bullies, even if the man he became was cold and distant. Now Reginald was gone, and Nathaniel Gallagher, the senior partner of the law firm, cleared his throat at the head of the table. "Thank you all for coming," Mr. Gallagher said, his voice a deep, gravelly baritone. He adjusted his silver-rimmed glasses and opened the thick, leather-bound folder containing Reginald's last will and testament. Mr. Montgomery's instructions were very specific, and as his executor, it is my duty to see them carried out to the letter. Beatrice leaned forward. She didn't want millions. She just hoped Reginald had left her enough to replenish her depleted retirement savings so she wouldn't lose her small apartment in South Boston. Mr. Gallagher began reading the distributions. The numbers were staggering. To my wife, Sylvia, Gallagher read, his tone strictly professional, "I leave the sum of $12 million, the primary residence in Beacon Hill, and the summer estate in Nantucket." Sylvia didn't even look up from her phone. She simply offered a curt, satisfied nod. To my nephew, Preston Davis, "I leave my shares in Montgomery Logistics, totaling an estimated value of $8.5 million, along with the vintage automobile collection." Preston smirked, leaning back in his chair and crossing his arms behind his head. "About time," he muttered under his breath. Mr. Gallagher turned a page. The room grew incredibly quiet. He looked up, his eyes meeting Beatrice's for a fleeting second before darting back down to the heavy parchment. He seemed almost hesitant. "And finally," Mr. Gallagher continued, his voice tightening slightly, "to my sister, Beatrice Harrington." Beatrice held her breath. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "I leave the contents of the attached envelope." Mr. Gallagher reached into the back of the folder and pulled out a small, plain white envelope. He slid it across the vast expanse of the mahogany table. It stopped right in front of Beatrice. Sylvia finally put her phone down, her eyes narrowing with malicious curiosity. Preston leaned forward, a cruel grin spreading across his face. Trembling, Beatrice picked up the envelope. It was painfully light. She slid her thumb under the flap, tearing the paper. Inside, there was a single crisp $1 bill. Wrapped around it was a small piece of typed paper. Beatrice pulled it out, her vision blurring as she read the words aloud in a frail whisper. For my sister Beatrice, who always knew the exact value of things. Silence hung in the air for a fraction of a second before Preston burst into loud, echoing laughter. $1, Preston gasped, slapping the table. He left you a single buck. Oh man, that is rich. The old man actually had a sense of humor at the end. Sylvia chuckled softly, a venomous sound. Well, Beatrice, she purred, I suppose it's exactly what your nursing skills were worth. Don't spend it all in one place. The tea is getting expensive these days. Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face. The humiliation was a physical blow, punching the breath from her lungs. It wasn't about the money. It was about the betrayal. After all she had done, after sacrificing her own financial security to ensure he didn't die alone, Reginald had reduced her love to a cruel public punchline. He had allowed these vultures to humiliate her. Tears spilled over her wrinkled cheeks. She didn't say a word. She couldn't. Beatrice shoved the dollar bill and the note into her worn handbag, pushed her chair back with a loud scrape, and hurried out of the boardroom. She didn't stop when she heard Mr. Gallagher call her name. She ran into the elevator, descended to the lobby, and walked straight out into the freezing Boston rain, weeping openly on the sidewalk as the world rushed by. May your family be blessed with health, peace, and prosperity. 4 days passed. Beatrice had barely left her small, drafty apartment. The heating was acting up again, and she spent her days wrapped in a heavy quilt, sipping cheap tea and staring at the wall. Stacked on her kitchen counter were 3 final notice bills. Her bank account was overdrawn. The $1 bill sat on her coffee table, a constant, agonizing reminder of her foolishness. She had given her twilight years to a man who despised her. On Thursday afternoon, a sharp, authoritative knock echoed through her apartment. Beatrice tightened her robe and shuffled to the door, peering through the peephole. She gasped. Standing in the dimly lit, peeling hallway of her building was Mr. Nathaniel Gallagher. He was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that likely cost more than her entire year's rent, clutching a thick leather briefcase. She unchained the door and opened it a crack. Mr. Gallagher, what are you doing here? If Sylvia sent you to demand I pay for the coffee I drank at the reading, I don't have it. The lawyer offered a sad, empathetic smile. May I come in, Beatrice? Please. It's imperative. Reluctantly, she stepped aside. Gallagher walked into the cramped living room, taking in the water stains on the ceiling, the threadbare rug, and finally, the $1 bill resting on the coffee table. I owe you a profound apology for how things transpired in the boardroom, Gallagher said, removing his coat and sitting on the edge of her sagging armchair. But it had to be done exactly that way. Reginald insisted on it. There were cameras in that room, Beatrice. Sylvia's legal team demanded everything be recorded to ensure there was no undue influence. He wanted me humiliated on tape, Beatrice asked, her voice cracking with lingering hurt. Is that it? No, Gallagher said sharply, his professional demeanor slipping into something fiercely protective. He wanted you completely, undeniably dismissed in the eyes of Sylvia and Preston. He needed them to believe you got absolutely nothing. Beatrice frowned, confused. I did get absolutely nothing. I got $1. Beatrice, you need to understand who we were dealing with, Gallagher said, leaning forward. Sylvia retained a team of probate sharks 6 months before Reginald even passed. If your brother had left you $1 million, or even $100,000, Sylvia would have contested the will. She would have dragged you into court, tied up the estate in litigation for a decade, and bled you dry with legal fees. You wouldn't have seen a penny. Beatrice blinked, pulling her quilt tighter. So, he gave me $1 so she wouldn't sue me. Gallagher unlatched his heavy briefcase. The metallic click sounded loud in the quiet apartment. He pulled out a massive stack of documents covered in red stamps and notarized seals. In corporate law, a contract or a transfer of assets isn't legally binding unless consideration is exchanged, Gallagher explained, sliding the documents onto the coffee table next to the dollar bill. Consideration is something of value given by both parties. It can be millions of dollars. Or it can be a single nominal dollar. Gallagher pointed to the dollar bill on the table. That wasn't an inheritance, Beatrice. That was a receipt. Beatrice stared at the money, her heart beginning to beat faster. A receipt for what? 2 years ago, when Reginald realized the extent of Sylvia's greed, he established a blind corporate shell company in Delaware called Ironwood Holdings, LLC. Over the next 18 months, he quietly liquidated some of his most valuable off-the-books assets, private investments, offshore accounts, and generational family heirlooms, and transferred them all into this LLC. Gallagher tapped the top document. 1 week before he died, Reginald drafted a binding corporate sale. He sold the entirety of Ironwood Holdings, LLC to you. The purchase price? $1, the exact dollar he handed you in that envelope. Beatrice's jaw dropped. She looked from the lawyer to the documents. I bought a company. You didn't inherit it, which means it bypasses probate entirely. Gallagher smiled, a genuine, triumphant smile. Sylvia's lawyers can scour the will all they want. This transaction happened before his death. You own it, free and clear. The dollar was the legal consideration that made the contract ironclad. Beatrice felt dizzy. The room seemed to spin. Mr. Gallagher, what exactly does Ironwood Holdings own? The lawyer stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. Get your coat, Beatrice. It's better if I show you. And pack an overnight bag. You won't be returning to this apartment tonight. Or ever again, for that matter. An hour later, Beatrice was sitting in the passenger seat of Gallagher's luxury SUV. They had driven out of Boston, merging onto the Mass Pike, and heading west toward the Berkshire Mountains. The city skyline faded into rolling hills, dense pine forest, and winding, isolated country roads. Beatrice was entirely silent, her mind racing. The brother she thought had betrayed her had actually orchestrated a brilliant, stealthy maneuver to protect her. Where are you watching from tonight? Let us know in the comments. As the sun began to set, casting an orange and purple glow over the mountains, Gallagher turned the SUV off the main highway onto an unmarked, unpaved gravel road hidden behind a thick stand of weeping willows. They drove for another 2 miles in complete isolation. Finally, the trees parted. Beatrice gasped, pressing her hands against the cold glass of the car window. Rising out of the forest like something from a forgotten fairy tale were 2 massive wrought iron gates. Beyond them, obscured by decades of ivy and overgrowth, stood a sprawling Gilded Age stone mansion. It had towering slate roofs, magnificent bay windows, and sprawling terraces that overlooked a private secluded lake. It was breathtaking, haunting, and completely hidden from the rest of the world. Welcome to Blackwood Manor, Gallagher said quietly, bringing the car to a halt before the gates. Reginald bought this property 30 years ago under a pseudonym. Sylvia doesn't know it exists. Preston doesn't know it exists. It is entirely off the grid. And as of today, it belongs exclusively to you. Beatrice was trembling. It's beautiful. But Mr. Gallagher, how can I possibly maintain a place like this? The taxes alone. Gallagher turned to her, his eyes gleaming in the fading light. Beatrice, the house is just the beginning. Reginald didn't just leave you real estate. Wait until you see what he hid in the basement. The heavy tires of Mr. Gallagher's SUV crunched against the overgrown gravel driveway as they pulled up to the sweeping stone steps of the property. He produced a heavy brass key from his coat pocket and unlocked the imposing mahogany front doors, pushing them open with a muted groan. He flipped a switch, and suddenly the grand foyer was bathed in warm golden light from a massive crystal chandelier. It runs on an independent geothermal system and a backup diesel generator, Gallagher explained, noting her surprise. Reginald spared no expense on self-sufficiency. Beatrice stepped inside, her worn boots sinking into a plush Persian rug. Much of the furniture was draped in white dust covers, looking like sleeping ghosts. The air smelled of old paper, lemon oil, and the faint, nostalgic scent of pipe tobacco, Reginald's signature blend. It's overwhelming, Beatrice whispered. But Nathaniel, a house like this, the property taxes must be astronomical. Wait, Gallagher said gently, guiding her down a long, portrait-lined corridor. You haven't seen the true inheritance yet. They arrived at the library, a stunning room paneled in rich cherry wood. Gallagher walked to a section of shelving, reached behind a thick, leather-bound encyclopedia, and pulled a concealed lever. With a soft click, the entire bookcase swung outward, revealing a narrow set of concrete stairs. Her heart hammering, Beatrice followed him down. At the bottom was a heavy stainless steel vault door. Gallagher punched a sequence into the digital keypad, turned a large chrome wheel, and heaved it open. "Go ahead, Beatrice," he said softly. She stepped into a climate-controlled room the size of her entire Boston apartment. It was lined with heavy steel shelving, and what rested on those shelves made her knees buckle. Stacked in neat, gleaming pyramids were dozens of 1-kilogram gold bars. Next to the gold were several temperature-controlled glass cases. One held a collection of pristine, vintage Patek Philippe watches. Another shelf held thick, sealed sleeves containing municipal bearer bonds and what looked like original stock certificates for companies like Boeing and Johnson & Johnson. "Good heavens," Beatrice gasped, resting a hand against the cold steel wall. How much is all this?" "The gold alone is worth roughly $14 million at current market prices," Gallagher said. "The bearer bonds and the watch collection pushed the total value of Ironwood Holdings, LLC, well past $30 million. And because you purchased the LLC for $1, these assets are completely shielded from the Montgomery estate." On a small pedestal in the center of the room sat a single velvet box and a handwritten letter sealed with red wax. Beatrice walked over on trembling legs. She broke the seal and unfolded the thick parchment. It was her brother's handwriting, shaky from his illness, but undeniably his. "My dearest Beatrice, if you are reading this, then my final play worked. I know I was a hard man, Bea. I know I did not deserve the grace and love you showed me when my mind began to fail. 3 years ago, I hired a private investigator. I discovered Sylvia was secretly funneling millions from our joint accounts into offshore trusts in the Cayman Islands, preparing to divorce me and take half my empire. When my diagnosis came, she paused her plans, realizing it would be easier to just wait for me to die. Preston was helping her alter company ledgers. They thought I was losing my mind. They thought I was weak. But a Montgomery never goes down without a fight. I spent my last lucid months taking out massive, high-interest corporate loans, using Montgomery Logistics and the Beacon Hill properties as collateral. I took that borrowed cash and bought untraceable hard assets, the gold, the bonds, the watches, and funneled them into Ironwood Holdings. Sylvia and Preston think they inherited a fortune. In truth, they have inherited a mountain of toxic debt. The company is a hollow shell. The houses are mortgaged to the hilt. The creditors will seize everything within 6 months. I left you $1 in public to humiliate you in their eyes, ensuring they would never suspect you walked away with the actual treasure. Forgive me for that momentary pain, my sweet sister. It was the only way to protect you. Live beautifully. Rest easy. The debt is theirs. The empire is yours. With all my love, Reginald." Beatrice fell to her knees, the letter clutched to her chest, and sobbed. This time, they were not tears of humiliation or betrayal, but tears of profound relief, grief, and awe. Her big brother had protected her one last time. 7 months later, the atmosphere in Nathaniel Gallagher's Boston office was entirely different. Beatrice sat in a plush leather chair, sipping Earl Grey tea. She looked radiant, wearing a tailored navy blue blazer and a discreet but priceless pearl necklace from the vault. The boardroom doors burst open. Sylvia marched in, looking utterly deranged, her designer suit wrinkled, her eyes wild with panic. Preston trailed behind her, looking pale and exhausted. "You," Sylvia shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Gallagher. "You set us up." Mr. Gallagher calmly closed his laptop. "Mrs. Montgomery, Mr. Davis, to what do I owe this intrusion?" "Don't play coy." Sylvia slammed a thick stack of foreclosure notices on the table. "The Beacon Hill house is in foreclosure. Chase Bank froze all my accounts, and Preston just found out that Montgomery Logistics has $94 million in outstanding corporate debt. The company is bankrupt. It's worthless." "The creditors seized my vintage cars this morning," Preston mumbled, sinking into a chair. "I have nothing." "I am sorry to hear of your financial difficulties," Gallagher said smoothly. "However, I merely executed the will exactly as Reginald dictated. It is not my fault Mr. Montgomery heavily leveraged those assets prior to his passing." Sylvia's eyes darted to Beatrice, who was calmly sipping her tea, her expression contorted into a snarl. "You knew. Where is the missing money? We hired a forensic accountant. He found a paper trail, a shell company in Delaware, Ironwood Holdings. We know you own it, Beatrice. You are going to sign that company over to us right now, or I swear to God, I will sue you for fraud, embezzlement, and elder abuse." Mr. Gallagher stood up, his polite demeanor vanishing, replaced by the lethal sharpness of a senior litigator. "You will do absolutely no such thing, Sylvia," his voice boomed. "If you attempt to file a single brief against my client, I will personally hand over the private investigator's dossier regarding your offshore Cayman accounts to the IRS. I have documented proof of your embezzlement. That is wire fraud and tax evasion, carrying a mandatory federal prison sentence." Sylvia froze, the color draining from her face. Gallagher loomed over them. Furthermore, Ironwood Holdings was not an inheritance. It was a corporate acquisition executed legally for the consideration of $1. It is untouchable by probate, by creditors, and by you. You are trespassing. I suggest you both leave before I call security, and I suggest you find good bankruptcy attorneys. I hear they run quite expensive these days. Preston stood up, utterly defeated, and walked out. Sylvia stared at Beatrice, her chest heaving, realizing she had been completely outplayed. Without a word, she turned and fled. Silence fell. Beatrice looked at Mr. Gallagher and smiled. "Well, that was certainly more pleasant than the last time we were all in this room together." Gallagher chuckled. "Indeed, it was. Now, moving on. The paperwork for the Reginald and Beatrice Harrington Foundation has cleared. The first round of grants for Alzheimer's research and caregiver support has been approved." Beatrice beamed. She kept Blackwood Manor, now fully staffed, and enough wealth to live her remaining years in absolute comfort. The rest of the fortune was being funneled into charities that supported families dealing with terminal illness, ensuring no one else had to sacrifice their livelihood to care for a loved one. Later that evening, Beatrice sat on the grand stone terrace of Blackwood Manor, watching the sunset paint the private lake in shades of gold and crimson. She opened her handbag and pulled out a small framed object. It was the single, crisp $1 bill Reginald had left her. She placed it carefully on the patio table, right next to her glass of expensive vintage wine. She raised her glass to the fading light. "You always knew the exact value of things, Reggie," she whispered into the twilight. "Thank you." If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to support the channel. If you were captivated by Beatrice's stunning journey from a humiliating $1 inheritance to ultimate vindication, please hit that like button and share this video with your friends. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss another incredible story of karma and hidden wealth. What would you do if you inherited a secret mansion? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. I'm so curious, where is everyone watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And what did you think of that story? Did it resonate with you? I would love to hear your thoughts and feelings about it. No matter where you are in the world, I want to send you my best wishes. I truly hope that you and your loved ones are always safe, healthy, and at peace. Finally, this is a community built on sharing. If you have an amazing story of your own that you think everyone should hear, please don't hesitate to share it with us in the comments. We're all here to listen.